John, we got a good guess because he's going to be very busy this month between having the number one pick in the draft and the number one record in the American League. That's Chris Antonetti, the president of the Cleveland Guardians, president of baseball operations of the Cleveland Guardians.
Yes, I agree. This is a terrific guy to bring on. You'll see with this interview why the Mets wanted to get him to run their baseball operation a couple of years ago, and he was one of many who decided not to do the job, and to stay in Cleveland. We'll find out exactly why he loves Cleveland so much and ask him about his great team, and I'm really looking forward to it.
I'm sure we'll have questions about Jose Ramirez and Stephen Kwan and Stephen Vogt, who's done such a great job following Terry Francona. John and I will discuss the Mets and Yankees and where they stand with the trade deadline. We'll play hit and error at the end if you stick with us on the show with Joel Sherman and Jon Heyman. John, it's July. It's your month, man. I don't think anybody does. Really, I say this sincerely, not just as your colleague and friend. I don't think if anyone works harder and does more to stay on top of this than you. You wrote what I want to kind of start with the Mets. You wrote a column, nypost.com, if you don't buy the newspaper. It's clear the Mets need some help in relief pitching. You mentioned 11 potential targets for them. Can I start with a big picture thing I've been thinking about,
Sure.
John,
Yeah.
which is they've played well enough to get to 41 and 41 as we're speaking, and right on the edge of this wild card. I mean, not on the edge. They're in the wild card, right on the edge of being one of the wild cards. Is it enough for you, or do you want to see more? Or are you, no, they've got a really good offense. They call Christian Scott back up. They maybe get Senga. They're a legitimate playoff contender. No more questioning about what to do. Go for it.
Well, I think they're definitely a playoff contender. I don't think there's any question about that. They're only a game and a half out of that race now, and they are one of the hotter teams in that race. There are 9 teams vying for 2 spots, though, so it's not going to take 80 wins or something. It's going to have to get to 84, 85 wins at the least, and I think they're going to have to get a little bit better, and I think they're going to have to go out and get some proven bullpen guys. You know, they have a few, obviously, but doesn't appear they have enough. Potentially Budo could come up and help. Potentially Lucchesi. They've got a few other guys down there. Walker. It's tough to make trades right now. As we do this, it's only July 2nd. There generally are not many trades until at least, I would say, the latter part of the month. So it's not going to be easy. And I'm sure they're going to try a number of things here. And I understand in my column, I'm aiming high. I named 11 back-end bullpen guys. They're basically closers. And to get those players, you're going to have to give up pretty good haul. You're going to have to probably give up a decent prospect. And I don't see that happening at this moment, but there are going to be other relief pitchers out there. And I say they're going to have to get somebody at some point. If they get one now, go ahead and do it. But certainly at some point, because I can't imagine that Lucchesi, Budo, and whatever else they have in the minors is going to be the answer, unless they just happen to call up guys. I mean, so far, I don't want to jump too much on a one appearance, but we've seen Festa, we've seen Jay for one appearance each. They called those guys up before they called up the other guys who I just mentioned. So that's a bit worrisome to me.
Yeah, John, I think that, as we know, nothing stirs action like an actual deadline, and it usually takes us to get a lot closer to the deadline. I think moving the draft to the All-Star game weekend has slowed things down even more as people's attention is diverted that way. Just want to say one thing about the Mets in a situation they are now, why I think they're going to kind of awake in mid-July and have to feel this compulsion, and maybe they'll blow this period. They're in an 18-game period that started yesterday when we're taping this, where they're playing Washington, Pittsburgh, Washington, Colorado, and Miami. That's before their second Subway Series. Gets a little tougher. Yankees, Braves, Twins then into the trade deadline. But this is a period where you got to feel like that's 18 games. Do you go 11-7? Do you go 12-6? In which case, we're going to feel they're really in the midst of this. And John, I think you hit on a key issue here, which is, and it's in your column as well. Maybe Edwin Diaz comes back at some point. I think he's due back at the end of this week from his sticky stuff suspension, and he's close to some version. I don't think we're seeing 2022 Edwin Diaz. That was one of the best relief seasons ever. But maybe he's closer to a version you could trust in the 9th inning. But I feel like one of the players they get has to be someone they feel is almost a co-closer, a safety net, somebody who can, hey, if this is all combustible this year, hey, Tanner Scott can close a game or somebody of that ilk, all the names that you included in your column, John.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. I mean, I had 11 names. Now there's several of those guys are not going to be traded. You know, maybe San Francisco's probably a long shot to sell. So I don't think they're going to trade Doval. I think Arizona is probably not that likely to sell. Seawald would be terrific coming back. He's a lot better pitcher now than he was when he was with the Mets. But there's 11 names on that list. There's got to be somebody there who they can pry away from their current team. And I do believe they do need that kind of pitcher. Uh, I mean, I'm really not sure about Diaz. To be fair, at this moment, look, he was suspended for the sticky stuff. His defense was that he uses it all. He does it this way all the time. So does that mean he was doing it all the time before this too? And
Yeah.
this was the performance, which really was kind of spotty at best. So I love the guy. Terrific guy. Was one of the greatest relief years we've ever seen a couple of years ago. But I'm not sure that you can absolutely say that this is going to be a good closer, much less a 2022 Edwin Diaz closer. That's why I'm saying let's go get one of these 11 guys. Now, like I said, not all of them are going to be traded. Many will not.
Yeah. So I think they need more than one. And one, though,
Yeah.
needs to be somebody, to your point, which I agree with, can take the ball from Diaz if Diaz isn't trustworthy. And John, you know how my brain works. I just can't not think about other people they could get. I'm going to throw out three names just
Yeah.
because you did such a great job throwing out 11. I'm going to throw out three. I like uh, uh, a couple of things in relief pitchers, and one more than any other with this Met group. I like low walk numbers. It's kind of a little bit why I'm iffy. As great as Tanner Scott's stuff is, I wonder
Yeah.
about him. I like low walk numbers. I like ground balls. I like some level of track record. So it's just not, oh, he had a good first half as a reliever. So some of that. And so mine were, if Arizona's out of it, would they trade Ryan Thompson, who big ground balls, defies home runs, has pitched a lot in the post, has 18 postseason games and has pitched well.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
that he stands out to me, maybe even more than Seawald, who said some not nice stuff about New York, I think, recently.
I forgive him. I forgive
Yeah.
him.
Well, the
A
question
lot
is,
of
does he
people,
want to
a
come
lot of
here?
people rip New York. A lot.
Yeah.
Well, I don't
My
care.
question is does he want to kind of be here, and do you
Yeah.
get less if he doesn't want to be here? He's one. Will Vest with Detroit. Detroit has a
Yeah.
lot of interesting bullpen options. Again, ground balls, low walks. And I'll throw out one other one that I think is fascinating, which is Nick Martinez. Nick Martinez didn't do well as a starting pitcher for the Reds this
Right.
year, but in the bullpen, he has a sub-2 ERA. And he has an interesting situation because he has a $12 million player option for next season. Do the Reds want to kind of see if they could get out of the potential of that? Because they did sign him to be a starter.
Right.
My suspicion is he's a Boris client. If he pitches well out of the bullpen, Scott will think like I could do a 3-year contract for 6 or 7, as a relief pitcher. He'll probably
Yeah.
opt out of that. I'm not positive. But even if not, the Mets are one of the teams that can incorporate that next year and have a $12 million. And I also like, for the Mets situation, Martinez has pitched well out of the bullpen, John, as a multi-inning guy. And it's clear the Mets are never going to get enough work out of their starting pitchers. So they need somebody in the bullpen who's trustworthy, who gives
Right.
them multiple innings. So I realize we're all just throwing darts
Yeah.
here, but I was looking
Right.
for the qualities in bullpen guys that I really like.
Yeah, as much as the Reds might want to get rid of that $12 million player option, I'm not sure I want to pick that up. I do like that pitcher. I like Nick Martinez. I think Will Vest is a good choice. I really like him. Ryan Thompson, another good choice. You really dug deep. I went for the more obvious
Yeah.
guys,
You
more
know how my
named
brain
guys.
works.
Yeah, I'm always going for the headline. So I went for the bigger names. But there are a lot of guys out there. The Giants, and I'm not sure they're selling. They've got the two Rogers guys. The
Yeah.
Twins are both performing well. Detroit's got a few guys who are actually performing well. That's a team that really should sell, as
Yes.
Cincinnati should too. Arizona, I'm not sure they're going to sell. I mean, that's kind of a flyer. And I don't care if the guy doesn't like New York. If he can pitch, who cares? Bring him here, and maybe you'll like it better the second time.
Wait till all the aggregators get all these names and say, post MLB insiders say Mets to get Ryan Thompson. Oh, do I hate those guys? Anyway, let's flip over to the Yankees, who also have a common need. They're going to need probably two relievers. Does it ease some if Scott Efros could ever come back and help them, or Lou Trevino? I think that's pie in the sky stuff. They keep bringing in the Phil Bickfords of the world. These guys aren't good enough. They're going to need to get it. The question is, John, do you think it goes deeper? Do you think they need to get somebody who plays either first, second, or third? And will they, by the time we get there, have to protect their starting pitching a little bit? Is Rodon
Yeah.
and Hill worrisome enough? We're going to see them over the next 2 days against the Reds this week. So take that where you want, John. I'm sorry I asked so
Yeah.
much there, but how much do you think the Yankees need?
Yeah, I mean, bullpen is clearly their focus. They have been talking to other teams about starters as well. I'm with you on the movement of the draft, and it's no, I don't think we're going to see anything or much of anything. The Arise thing was an aberration, so it's going to be a while. But I don't think they're in as bad a shape in that bullpen as the Mets are right now. I mean, the Mets are really grasping to me in the bullpen. At least they're doing everything else really well. So I'm not killing them or anything, but that's the way I feel. Yankees, that's their focus. There's no question about it. I think they need offense too. Can you survive with a two-man offense? I mean, I guess Stanton will be back. Hopefully, it's the month that he projected or was told that it would be, and that's it. And then there'll be a three-man offense. I mean, maybe I'm not giving enough credit to Volpe and Verdugo, who's been very good at times, and maybe I'm not giving enough credit to Rizzo coming back and performing. But I mean, right now they're operating with a two-man offense. That's not going to cut it. I'm still, and LeMahieu's been a little bit better. I'm still worried about third base. Second base, Torres has had a couple good games in a row. I'm worried there. First base, I think, is an open question. Bullpen is their focus right now, but I think you're going to have to expand that search.
Yeah, I'm wondering, was it over the weekend bad Toronto pitching, or did Torres and LeMahieu start to stir a little?
Maybe.
Both of those guys had over 800 OPS in the second half of last season. It's not from like some Jurassic time. They were good
Right.
hitters recently, and Torres is right in his prime. You should think that there's something better than we've seen so far. It's probably too much. It was probably before his time, but I kind of have liked Ben Rice's at bats so far. Like to see more of them. And I continue to say, John, Jahmai Jones, DH, hey, when Austin Wells isn't catching, he takes good at bats. Can just let him DH and see if playing continuously allows his bat to flourish, because the 2 on, 2 off, 1 on, 2 off thing is not working for his offense. Maybe he's not a good hitter, but he takes much better at bats than Jahmai Jones. And to me, you've got to try to, at this moment when Stanton is not around, try to put your best bats in the lineup.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of good ideas there. Torres, I know everyone says he was the most consistent hitter last year. I'm not sure what that means. I mean, Judge missed 2 months. Does that take him out of the most consistent? I mean, we'll put Judge aside. He's on another level from everybody, not just on this team, on every team. Torres was really good last year. I mean, I don't know if you want to say he's the most consistent, but he was really good throughout the year. He's still in his 20s. I do think that platform year may be affecting him. You saw what he looked like. They batted him clean up, and it seemed like he was I mean, I know he was struggling anyway. It was a little bit of an odd choice to begin with, but he couldn't. It looked like he couldn't handle cleanup. So I think the platform year is affecting him. He's got to figure out a way to not think about it or something. I don't know what it is, but he should be better. LeMahieu showed some signs. There's some positive signs. To me, they do need to address the offense still, because right now you've got two known excellent top of the game quantities, and you've got other guys you're hoping. That's about it.
Yeah. For them, it was bad news that Dominguez got hurt when he got hurt,
Yeah,
because he would
absolutely.
have come up and played regularly at this point. John, they're in a flat-footed tie with the Orioles as we speak, and human nature is human nature. It's hard to forget yesterday, but they're starting tied with half a season left. And if LeMahieu and Torres perform in the second half, as they did in the second half last season, it enlarges their lineup considerably. And you could even consider putting LeMahieu at the top of the order again and moving Volpe down. Aaron Boone seemed to always favor the idea. I think he really remembered in Judge's great season in 22. Judge's great season. Every time he's healthy, he has a great season. In his
Right.
historic season in 2022, he loved how LeMahieu handled at bats in front of Judge, understanding when they were attacking him, etc. I think he lose the speed if LeMahieu over the weekend was a sign that he's kind of got his legs back under him, got his swing, and is something. Toronto's pitching hasn't been very good, so it's going to take a lot more than 4 games
Yeah,
in north of the border. But it's something I'm watching just because those guys were really good in the second half last season, and I just
yeah.
think it's not impossible that they're good.
Right. It's not possible they're good. I would leave Volpe leading off. I know he hasn't been as good in the last few weeks, but that speed at the top of the lineup. I mean, I
But he
just don't
doesn't
see.
use the speed because he doesn't want to run with Soto and Judge up.
Yeah, well, he's still running. If he's on base, he's not maybe stealing as much. I'm not ready to demote Volpe. I like that move when he made it. I think it's generally been pretty good. And LeMayo's had a couple games. Let's see what it turns out to be.
Yeah.
You're very optimistic today. I gotta give you
Is that
credit. You're
optimistic?
obviously
I would
you're
bet
in a very
against
good mood. You're in a really good mood. I could see it.
John, I would bet against all of this stuff. Usually things go wrong. It's Major League Baseball. It's tough. But I'm trying to suggest they're not going to be able to trade for 4 things or 5 things at the deadline. They clearly are
I
going
get
to
it.
have to trade for bullpen. That is
Right.
not, to me, it doesn't feel solvable internally. They're
Right.
playing, they're bringing up a lot of Long Island Ducks to pitch. To me, they've got to go outside in a year where you have Cole, Soto, and Judge at their peak, and I'm assuming Cole will soon be at his peak again. You can't screw around. You got to get 2 high-end relief pitchers, and then if you don't have enough other collateral, you're in the praying, hoping level of can LeMahieu, Torres, Rizzo, Stanton, Rice, uh, um, and Wells, can 2, 3 of them hit well enough to join Soto, Judge, and make your lineup longer? I'm not here to be overly optimistic. I'm just suggesting they must fix the bullpen.
Well, they're with you because that's what they're prioritizing. Their focus is almost entirely on the bullpen. They're looking a little bit at starter. They have not been focused on offense. Obviously LeMahieu has a history, good track record. Rizzo does as well when he comes back. Certainly Stanton does. And they feel like they have the pieces, I think, and they probably are with you that they think they can't get 5 great pieces, and they're going to concentrate on the 2 bullpen pieces. So, I mean, I think you're probably going to end up being right that they're going to hope for the best from the offense and prioritize the bullpen, but I'm worried.
Yeah. One team that's almost certain to be involved at the trade deadline, because as we're speaking, they're better than the Yankees. They're better than the Orioles. They have the best record in the American League. That's the Cleveland Guardians. We'll be joined by their president of baseball operations, Chris Antonetti, if you stick with us on the show with Joel Sherman and Jon Heyman. John and I are so happy to be joined by the president of baseball operations of the Cleveland Guardians, Chris Antonetti, because it's so timely. Chris, July is kind of your month. You come in leading the American League best record. You're less than 2 weeks away from having the first pick, and you're about 4 weeks away from seeing how much you can improve your team, which is leading the AL Central by 6 games as we speak, in helping them at the trade deadline. So I almost don't know where to start. So let's start with your major league team. And something that's obvious, you had one of the best managers probably in baseball history, in Terry Francona, leading your team for a long time, for a majority of time that you were a top executive there. And you had to make a decision to go with somebody else. You went with somebody who last played in 2022, had been a bullpen coach for 1 year in Stephen Vogt. Why him, and why is it working?
Yeah, just rewinding, Joel, as you said, it was a daunting challenge for us to think about the transition in life after Tito. He's not only a Hall of Fame manager, but he made an indelible impact on our organization in the 11 years he was here. And to think about trying to sustain success after Tito that was daunting to think about. But we were fortunate. We went through a pretty extensive process, and the end of that resulted in us offering the position to Stephen Vogt. And I think Stephen's done a tremendous job. I'd be saying this, by the way, if our record was reversed. He's been an awesome leader for us. He has a great blend of self-confidence and humility. He has great ideas and thoughts on how the game should be played and ways we can be successful, but also has a humility to invite other opinions and bring the best ideas out in other people. And the things he's concerned about is what's the best thing to do for the organization? What's the best thing to do for players? And He's created a great environment around our team to do that. And he relates, the last part I would just add is he relates extraordinarily well to people across all areas, players, staff members. He's just got this unique way to relate to people, bring people together, and put them in positions to succeed. And that's what great leaders do.
Your team is famous for overachieving. You've done this before, but this is pretty dramatic. You lost your ace pitcher right away, and Bieber, and you're running away in your division, and it's no fluke. I mean, you're in the top 5 in hitting, the top 5 in pitching. Are you even a little surprised about this performance so far?
We go into every year, John, not trying to we don't place expectations on it. Our job is to do the best we can to bring a group together, put them in positions to be successful, and then try to create the best environment and resources for players to thrive and grow. It's no secret we are a really young team. We're the youngest team in baseball again this year. We've been the youngest team in baseball, I think, each of the last 3, if not 4 years. So we know success for us is entirely dependent upon the group of players we have here continuing to grow and get better. And I give our players and our coaches and Stephen a ton of credit for the way in which they've continued to grow and evolve as individuals and as a team, because by and large, this is a very similar group that we've had here in 2022 and 2023 with some changes, but a lot of the same personnel. And what we're seeing is this group continue to grow and mature.
You know, Chris, you've had a lot of success in your time with Cleveland, especially since ascending, I think, in 2012 to be the general manager and ultimately team president. I think it's since you've been the general manager, starting in 2012, 6th best record in baseball is by Cleveland. But we usually see it because your starting pitching is so good. And it's kind of been a flip-flop this year. John mentioned no Bieber. You just had to send down Tristan McKenzie, who was struggling this season. The offense is far better than I think we anticipated. And there's been a lot of talk about you guys trying to go for maybe a little more swing and miss, accepting swing and miss to try to get to power. Can you talk to us about this transformation? And mostly, do you think it's sustainable? Your numbers with runners in scoring position and runners on base is tremendous. Is that all sustainable?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. First, going back to the rotation, we need to be better. That's clearly the area of the team where we've historically had some consistency, and it's been a big driver of our success in the past. But this year, it's an area that it's been inconsistent. And for us to have a successful second half of the season and find our way into the postseason, we know we need more consistency from our starting rotation. Because up to this point, we've largely relied on our bullpen, which has been outstanding. And then, our offense, or actually our position player team, both offensively and defensively, has done a really good job. So, we need to continue to score runs, continue to play good defense. If our bullpen can continue to perform at a really good rate, that'll be helpful for us. But we know we can't continue to rely so heavily on the bullpen without getting more consistency from the rotation.
We're going to mostly talk about the 2024 Guardians on here, but I'm going to go slightly off that topic, stay on with you, though, and ask you, a couple years ago, I know you were basically at the top of the list of the guys that Steve Cohen and Sandy Alderson wanted to get to come to New York and run the baseball operation. I mean, obviously, the Mets have a great guy leading now, David Stearns, but you were certainly sought after, and as Joel mentioned, you're 6th in baseball and wins in the last few years, which is pretty darn good considering your payrolls are probably 28th or 29th, something like that. It might even be 30th. I might even be insulting you. Did you consider, you're from Connecticut, right? You stayed on the East Coast for college. Did you consider it, or do you just love Cleveland so much that there was no way in heck you were coming to New York?
I love the people I work with in Cleveland. I feel I'm really fortunate to work with a great ownership in Paul Dolan, and he's been an incredible steward for the franchise and the environment he's created for us to really lead within our baseball operations group. And, I feel privileged to get the opportunity to work alongside so many great people that that I continue to learn from and grow from and challenge each other every day to get better. And it's really a great environment to come to work every day. My family and I have been happy here, and so it's been a really good and fun run here in Cleveland, and hopefully we can continue moving forward and continue to find success here.
Forgive me, I'm going to try too, Chris. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm going to try too, because that was a good non-answer there. You've been sought after. Look, the flowers are deserved, not just because you're here. You've been one of the best at this. It's not just the Mets, Cardinals, other teams have come for you over the last couple of decades, and you've stayed where you're staying. Could could the Mets or somebody else have talked you out of it, or is this a commitment to where you are?
Joel, it's so one, thank you. By the way, you can tell this is probably the least comfortable thing for me to talk about is talking
And
about
that's why I
myself. I'd
set
much
it up
rather
by
talk about
saying
the
I have to
team.
try
So
it. Yeah.
I'll look
Good
forward
job,
to
Joel.
transitioning back to that
Yeah.
after we finish this. So
Yeah.
um, I just, like I said, like I mentioned to John, I really do feel privileged to have the opportunity to work alongside so many great people. My family and I are really happy here. I have two daughters that have, it's rare in this business to be able to have continuity and to work in a place and not disrupt family lives. And hopefully, I have my oldest daughter is now a senior in high school. The youngest one is a sophomore, and I'm hopeful they'll be able to have their entire childhood in one city. And I place a premium on that as a father and a parent. That's something that has been important to me in addition to the great professional environment that I've had. So as I said, I've been really happy in Cleveland, and I'm hopeful to be able to continue to work here and work in such an incredible environment. Can we now go back to other baseball stuff?
Yeah. Because
Yeah,
you've mastered that. You've mastered that answer. So
is it my turn now? I think it's my turn now.
yeah.
Let me ask you. We'll get to the 2024 Guardians. I promise you. The Lindor trade. When you made that trade, a lot of people thought that it was lopsided in favor of the Mets. Didn't turn out that way. Jimenez has been fantastic. When you made that trade, was Jimenez the key? We thought Rosario was the key, but that's how little we know. He's a good major league player, but Jimenez has been a star for you guys. And are you do you think Lindor has reached the expectations that you had for him, or he's been good with the Mets, very good, but some people think, well, he's not a $341 million player.
So I think going back to the trade at the time, we were trying to do the best we could and acquire the best package of players. So I would say both Ahmed and Andres were both important parts of the deal. We were trying to thread a needle where we obviously were trading Francisco, who was one of the best players in baseball at the time. So we were trying to reposition our team to be successful in the future, but we also were trying to compete in that year. And ultimately, we were able to have us, still remain competitive despite trading Francisco. And part of that was we were bringing back two players to our major league team that we felt could contribute. And both Ahmed and Andres did that really from the first year with us. So both guys were important. And then in terms of Francisco, I think, he continues to be one of the best players in baseball and shortstop in baseball. I know maybe some of the superficial top level numbers don't always show that, but he contributes in so many areas, offensively, defensively, on the bases. And I think he continues to have a bright future. And I think when Mets fans look up at the end of his turn or his time with the Mets, they'll have come to appreciate all of the things Francisco brings to them. And, hopefully for them, it results in some NL East championships.
Yeah, I do agree with you. He is one of the best players in the game. I didn't mean to give him short shrift. 341 million is just a lot of money. So I just wanted to ask you as a follow-up. I know you tried for Francisco. You didn't offer him quite 341 million, but how close do you think you came, and did you think you had a realistic shot of getting Francisco at some point?
So hard to define close, as you guys know in this game. You can feel, oftentimes you feel close and you find out later you're quite far away. But what I will say is our ownership at times made a very sincere effort to keep Francisco in Cleveland and present him with choices. Again, I fully respect Francisco's how he approached things, and it was important to him to go to the market and see what the market might bear for him. Or at least that's what he was maintaining. And we had dialogue back and forth. And we couldn't align on those values despite each side maintaining an interest in trying to do that. And, again, I'm happy for him that he landed in a place with the Mets where he was happy and fulfilled and signed the extension that I think he and the Mets are happy about.
Since you didn't tell us how close Steve Cohn came to actually getting you, you'll tell us who you're picking first in the draft in 2
By the way,
weeks.
lost in all this is the Mets hired an exextraordinary person.
Yes.
David Stearns is an incredible.
We've had him on the show. We've had him on the show.
Okay.
We got you on the show now.
I've worked closely with David, and he's one of the most respected, if not the most respected executives in the game.
I mentioned that.
A great leader. Yeah,
I mentioned that, but he's not on the show. You're on the show.
All right, fair enough. I just want to make sure we gave David his due. That's all.
No, I said that he is one of the best. I agree. Yeah.
What was the question again? Where are we?
Are you going to tell us who you're picking first?
Sure. No, I don't know. It's the honest answer. I think it's going to come down to the last few moments. I don't think we'll know until just moments before we pick. We're fortunate that in this year, at least our assessment is there are a number of good guys and a number of top quality players that are available to us with the first pick in the draft. And I think what we're trying to do is maximize the overall talent pool that we bring into the organization. And I think at the end of, when we get through when we get through the draft, the end of the draft, I think we'll feel good about not only our first pick, but the totality of talent that we're bringing in.
Well, that leads to a natural follow-up, which is you're going to get to bring in a lot of talent. You're picking first, which means you're picking first at the top of every round. Does that?
No. We're only picking first
Oh,
at
I'm
the
sorry.
top of the first round. Then
First
we go
round.
back to our normal pick.
Do you feel that by having draft collateral this year, where you can have access to good players, does that open the door to be more bold making trades between now and July 30th? Because you're going to do some replenishing significantly in the next couple of weeks.
I'm not sure they're necessarily directly connected, Joel. I mean, I think you know how we have to operate. We have to be mindful of the opportunities we have each year to get to the postseason. I think our track record shows the years in which we are competitive around the deadline, we try to improve. Now, that's not always possible, but if you go back to as far back as 2011 and 2016, 17, 18, 19, like we added players around the trade deadline when we were in competitive positions. I think we'll take that general mindset this year going into the deadline, but I'm not sure whether or not we'll be able to find that right fit where we can bring in talent at a cost that we think is justified. Because as important as this year is for us, one of the things we want to make sure we're doing is finding a way to sustain our competitiveness moving forward and not mortgage too much of the future for one opportunity that we have in front of us. And I think, you guys highlighted earlier that mindset and mentality has been instrumental in us maintaining success in a small market over the last decade plus.
Yeah, I won't ask you if you think it's fair that your juggernaut team gets the first pick. That's the way it fell, and you do have one of the lowest payrolls. So I think if I think it's fair, I'm sure you think it's fair. Tell me about the trade deadline. Your hitting has been outstanding, and not just Quan and Naylor, but I mean Fry. I don't know where he's come from. We can ask you about that later. But are you looking at pitching like just about everybody else? Is that the priority?
John, I think if you look at our team, there are a number of opportunities where we can improve. I think you touched on a couple. Our starting rotation is the place where we've been most inconsistent. It was one of the reasons why we signed Matt Boyd recently. Matt's a guy that's recovering from Tommy John surgery. We think he's going to be able to impact us at some point in August. So it was through that lens that we tried to bring, or that we decided to bring that in. And we're fortunate we were able to align with that because although we are looking for starting pitching, we anticipate it being a very tight market to try to acquire that, especially as you start to look at how many teams are still contending, and we anticipate being in the mix at the end of the month. And it might be very difficult and very costly to acquire starting pitching. So, but that'll be an area where we continue to look, as well as, if there are opportunities to improve on the offensive side or elsewhere, we'll be engaged in those fronts too.
It's interesting. John just talked about your offense and he mentioned Quan, Naylor, and Fry. Is Jose Ramirez having the best Hall of Fame level career that nobody ever talks about? I think he's finished top 6 in the MVP 6 times. If the vote was held today, I think he'd finish 5th. Again, are we all kind of sleeping on a Cooperstown bound career here?
You guys are obviously much more familiar with the media on the East Coast, so I'll leave that to you to determine how under or overrated he is. But I can tell you, in Cleveland, we so appreciate all the things that Jose brings to our organization. He is a Hall of Fame caliber player, but beyond that, he also sets the tone for how we play. It's very helpful for a manager. And Tito used to reference this all the time. Stephen Vogt's come to appreciate it. When you talk about all of the little things in the game, Jose does all of those little things in addition to the big things. He's constantly studying pitchers. He's the guy that's always looking to take the extra base. He has incredible baseball IQ. He is mentally engaged in every pitch. He knows where to go with the ball every time it's in his hands. All of those little things that can add up over the course of the season, Jose sets such an extraordinary example. So not only is he a Hall of Fame caliber talent in terms of what he contributes, he's also been a Hall of Fame caliber teammate for us.
What about this Fry guy? I mean, it feels like it's out of nowhere. Does
Yeah.
it feel that way to you too?
So David's worked incredibly hard. He's a guy that we got from Milwaukee a few years ago in a trade, and there were some ingredients that we liked. He's pretty athletic for a guy who could play multiple positions, and we liked some of the ingredients he had to hit. But one of the things that David has continued to do is really dive into the work, both offensively and defensively. He's put in a ton of work. Up until recently, where he had some elbow issues, he actually established himself as a really good defensive catcher. So if you can combine a good defensive catcher with the level of offense he's providing, that's a big boost to a team. And so I think, again, David and the coaches deserve a ton of credit for the progress he's made on both sides of the ball.
I didn't know I could ask the question this way until John just did it. So what about this Quan guy, who was flirting with 400 there for a while and has kind of added some heft, right? The ball's coming off his bat in a different way this year.
Yeah, he's one of the guys that we talked about, Joel, as we talked about that continued maturation and evolution of some of the guys that we have on our team. Steven's a great example of that. I think he's starting to get comfortable at the major league level and appreciates the skills that he has. He has this uncanny ability to put the bat on the ball and put the ball in play. So what we've partnered with Steven on is talking about like that skill is an incredible skill to have. So you should therefore not necessarily be concerned about getting to two strikes, because if you get to two strikes, you can still find a way to put the ball in play. What there's an opportunity for is earlier in the count or in advantage counts, let's look to be a little bit more aggressive and look to just drive balls a little bit more instead of just putting the balls in play. And that theme has been consistent. It's something that our coaches have talked about, not just with Steven, but a number of players on our roster going back to the end of last year through the offseason in spring training. And I think Steven's a great example of seeing that approach pay off.
I check out the framing stats every once in a while. I'm not like Joel. I don't have them memorized, but your framing stats are crazy. I mean, I think Trevino is probably the best at it in baseball. So the Yankees have that advantage to have their starting catcher be so good at it. But all of your catchers are great at framing. First of all, I mean, this is basically stealing strikes that they don't deserve. First of all, do you feel guilty about this? And second of all, are you guys against the automatic ball strike because you're so good at stealing the strikes?
Well, hey, it's within the rules. So I think what we try to do is have our guys be as attentive as they can to presenting the pitch in the best way possible to help our pitchers. And it's really a mindset that, again, we've been fortunate to have an incredible catching instructor for years in Sandy Alomar. And now we've partnered that Craig Alvernaz has come over and joined our staff, who's also really attentive on the catching side. And Stephen Vogt is also a former catcher. And then combine that with bringing Austin Hedges back, who's been renowned for not only the way he receives, but just overall defensively as a catcher, the way he leads a pitching staff. And there's been an environment among our group to try to be the best they can defensively, and that includes framing. And as I mentioned with David, if you look at his progress year to year, that's one of the areas, John, where he's made huge strides, and it's made a big impact for our pitchers.
And so are you against the automatic ball strike because you have that advantage?
We have ways to go before that'll be implemented. So whatever the rules are, we'll figure out a way to adjust.
All right.
God, you're good. Chris, since you're so good, I'll wrap up by asking. Obviously, you're not going to tell us who you're taking first in the draft, but just to get back to the draft, John and I don't know a ton about this area, but the word is that this isn't like a Bryce Harper or Strasburg or even a Skeens crew kind of draft. That there's a lot of people in play for number one, which means because you have one, I think that's slotted at over 10 million. Can you just philosophically take us through how you're thinking about the first pick in the draft?
Yeah, sure. I'm sorry. Keep going.
I was going just philosophically, is it the best player available? Is it trying to make sure you get the three best players you can for a certain amount of money in the first 3-4 picks, etc.? How are you philosophically handling having this moment?
Yeah, so I think I touched on this briefly earlier, but we have not only the first pick, but the largest draft pool in history. So our responsibility and our goal as an organization is to use this opportunity to bring in the most talent we can. And so how do we take the resources and the draft capital that's available to us and bring in the most talented group? And there's a lot of different strategies that could go into figuring out how to do that. And so I do think there are a lot of good players at the top of the draft, and we feel fortunate to have the first selection. But how we parse through that, like I said, when I mentioned earlier, it might come down to the last few minutes, because a big part of that for us will be how do we think about not only the number one pick, but the totality of the draft pool to get the best return for our group.
Well, Chris, you've been with Cleveland since 1999. If you ever get tired of this, I think the president needs a spokesperson who gets to say really, really interesting things, but never really tells us everything. Still, first pick, Steve Cohn. You still got a moment here with us if you'd like to answer any of this.
I think I've covered it, Joel. Still,
You've
I have
covered
enough
it.
trouble. I have enough trouble doing my own job. I'm not worried about anyone else's, so I'll leave it at that for you.
Fully though, Chris, we always appreciate your time, whether when we're doing our job and when you're joining us on this job on the show with Joel Sherman and Jon Heyman.
Thank you, guys. Always a pleasure to be with you. I enjoy the conversation, so thank you.
We, of course, thank Chris Antonetti for joining us on the show. John, hit or error?
I'm going to go hit. James Wood has been called up by the Nats, as we saw last night, performed against the Mets. Mike Rizzo, the president of baseball operations for the Nats, did a very nice job. We knew that at the time when he traded the Juan Soto, the first Juan Soto trade, not the Yankee Juan Soto trade, but to get Mackenzie Gore, who looked really good last night as well, and C.J. Abrams at shortstop, who looked good at times, obviously didn't look good at some other times last night, helped the Mets out with an error. But to get those three players, still have two in the minors, Haskell and Susana, that was a great trade for him. And I'll give a half a hit on the Padres side, too, because somehow after trading those five big pieces, including Wood, who's one of the best prospects in baseball, they're fourth. They are ranked fourth in prospects in baseball somehow. I'm not sure how they do it, but I give A.J. Preller credit for that. He might have overpaid to get Soto, and as it turned out, Soto didn't perform for the Padres as he's performing for the Yankees overall, but they somehow have rebuilt the farm system. So big hit for the Nats for making that trade, and half a hit for the Padres for rebuilding that team.
You know, AJ Preller's conceit is I could trade him because I could find him. And so far, he keeps finding prospects, both in the draft and internationally, to continue to do it. John, I think I've given this an error before, and I'm going to do it again because as the Astros play better and better, they're within 3 games of the Mariners. And we talk about the aggressiveness of the Padres. Can some of that rub off on the Mariners, who, by the way, have never played in the World Series, have made the playoffs once in the last 23 years, and had a nice sizable lead in this division in a year where the division is soft? The Astros are, even back in it, are obviously not as good as the past 7 years. The defending champion Rangers seem to have taken a siesta on this season. The Angels and the A's are kind of levels of terrible. This was a year to, especially with very, very controllable starting pitching. Gilbert, Kirby, Wu, Miller, and a great contract in Castillo. It's like having your quarterback on the rookie contract where you can go get the pass rushing end, the close down cornerback, a great receiver. Hey, man, at the deadline, you got to find 2 bats. The batting average is the worst in the league. The strikeouts are out of control. The run scoring isn't good enough. You got a shot. You got a real shot with this starting pitching. Can we see some better than 54% aggression out of the Seattle Mariners?
Absolutely. That's an error, I guess, for now, right?
Yes.
Until they see what they do.
Well, you know, they've got, 28 days to go ahead and improve an offense around a very good pitching staff, especially a rotation that can win in October. And just before it gets very expensive, that rotation, they've got a good farm system to the point of the AJ Preller. When you have a good farm system, have the conceit that you'll get more. You got, they did this with Luis Castillo, and they made the playoffs 2 years ago.
Right. Yeah. I don't
now you got to find the
54%.
offense of Luis Castillo and be as aggressive using good prospects to go do it.
Yeah, I don't get the whole 54% thing, and I didn't look at the standings now, but that's about where they are, right? They're probably winning 54%, maybe slightly higher. I'm not sure, but they obviously need to get offense. They say they're going to. It's probably not a great year. I'm not sure there are too many great years. Are there great players traded in the middle? J.D. Martinez was once traded. We talked about Pete Alonso getting traded. I don't think that's happening. I mean, we could talk about Christian Walker getting traded. I still don't think the D-backs are going to be sellers, but they definitely need to do something about that offense that they have. They don't really have a second baseman. They could use help at first. They could use help in many spots. Obviously, J-Rod has been a major disappointment this year, and yeah, that's not a great goal at 54%, especially when you're in a division with a team that's always going for it, like the Astros, right? I mean, the Astros are a threat to win anytime, and they've lost what, 7 pitchers to the. They have 7 pitchers on the IL right now as we speak, and it's amazing to me that they're now over 500 from where they started. I was there for the first 4 games against the Yankees, and it went downhill from there for a while, and basically everybody in that rotation except for Blanco and Brown. White and brown, I guess, 2 guys named after colors. I showed off my 6 years of Spanish. That's what I came up with. Everybody's been hurt, and they're right there. And if anyone thinks that they're not a threat, they're really not paying attention. But you're right. Seattle needs to come up with somebody, and it's not going to be easy because other than Luis Robert, I can't tell you anybody else I think is going to get traded who's going to transform an average offense into a good offense.
Well, they need to compel somebody to trade somebody. And even Blanco missed 10 games on a sticky stuff suspension earlier in the year, right? And 547 is the winning percentage of the Mariners as we speak. So they're right at their comfort level.
It's
right?
good to set goals, but you should probably set higher goals than that. I'm already hated. I didn't think I was going to be welcomed there for the All-Star game. Was it the All-Star game? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm already hated there, but I mean, that's ridiculous.
Hated by 12 people on the internet. We're going to ignore them. Hitting much better than than a 54% winning percentage is our producers, Tommy Hogan and Jake Brown, who help us so much every week. Don't forget the New York Post YouTube page, the sports YouTube page, to come view our podcast. Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to a podcast, to listen to it, give us a 5-star rating, drop us a review, and please continue to stick with us on the show with Joel Sherman and Jon Heyman.